What is up, you guys, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. In today's video we're going to be copper foiling. So if you've been following along, it's the next step to my previous video, so let's get started. Okay guys, here we go. We're ready to finally wrap everything in our copper foil. So if you haven't seen the other videos, what we've done so far is traced our glass, cut our glass out, we've ground it, washed it, and now we're here. All of our pieces are fitting together like a puzzle piece, and we're ready to wrap everything in copper foil. So what you're going to need is a pair of scissors, tweezers, a burnishing tool, and your copper foil, obviously. So burnishing tool. What it does is basically after you wrap your piece in copper foil, it allows you to go back in and smooth down your edges. Obviously this is just a paintbrush. If you ask me, I don't see the point of buying a burnishing tool because a paintbrush or a pencil is going to do the same thing. It's just gently rubbing that edge until all those foil edges are smoothed down. But we'll show you more of that in a second. So I had already done a few pieces because I wanted to show you guys examples. There are different kinds of copper foil. Basic copper foil. So right here I have 1/4 inch regular copper backed copper foil. So the back of this is sticky, and that's what makes it stick to the glass, and it's also copper. So for different pieces, different glass types, you're going to need different copper foil. So right here I've also got black backed. So for a piece like this where I'm going to use black patina solder and chain, I want to use black copper foil or black backed copper foil. So when I peel this one back, instead of it being copper underneath, it's black, because you are going to see it through the edge of your glass no matter how good you are or how even you apply it. So when you peel this one back, it has a black backing. So this one right here, you can see down in these edges, that black backed copper foil. If I had used the regular one, you would see the copper foil edges on the inside, but I used black for this one. There's also silver backed copper foil. So on the underside of this copper foil, it's a silver backing. So for pieces that you want to use just regular silver solder for and silver chain, you would use that. So obviously on a piece like this, you're not going to use copper backed copper foil because you're going to see it through that blue edge and it just looks unprofessional and unfinished. But we'll get to that piece in a minute. So it's pretty easy wrapping edges in foil. I'm going to use my black backed, as I mentioned, because we're going to do black patina solder and chain. I've got my piece here. I'm going to zoom you in so you can see nice and close up exactly what I'm doing. Let me move you up a little bit. Alright, so got my black backed copper foil, my sticky side facing up. I'm going to take my piece of glass and gently sit it right in the middle of that copper foil. So when I say right in the middle, what I mean is when you look on each edge, there's going to be the same amount of copper foil hanging over the side. So I'm going to pull my tape down, gently run my finger along that edge so it's secure, go back in and pinch it closed. Both my edges are even and smooth. Pulling it back and running my finger along to make sure it's secure. Pulling more out and doing the same thing for all edges, making sure it's directly in the center. And now I'm back at the beginning, so I'm just going to overlap that edge about 1/2 inch and pinch it closed. So my little trick for edges that aren't perfectly straight, even just a little bit curved in like this one, I like to use this burnishing tool, so my little paintbrush, to slowly stretch that foil out and lay it down flat. I'm gonna need my burnishing tool in my hand in a second anyway to flatten down all these edges. So it's easy to just constantly have it handy. So slowly going back and forth to stretch that foil out. And once it's laid down, going over all those edges and smoothing the foil out. So it doesn't feel rough to the touch and it is securely adhered to the corner or the edge of that glass. That one's all set. Move on to the next one. So I'm gonna pull a little bit of this copper foil out to get it started and just rock my glass piece onto the very center of that copper foil edge, running my finger alongside the bottom to make sure it's secure, and moving on. Pulling a little bit out, slowly going along the very center of that foil, rubbing my finger so it's secure, going back and pinching the edges closed. This one's a little bit of an in curve, so I'm gonna wait to close that with my paintbrush. So because we've already ground all these pieces on the glass grinder, obviously we don't have to worry about our fingers getting sliced during this step. So slowly rocking it down the very center of that foil, gonna overlap my last edge and pinch it closed. And that is just about it. Going back in these concave edges, slowly stretching that foil out, because if I went right in and pinched these edges closed on a curve, on an inward curve like this, you're definitely gonna risk splitting your glass. And I'll show you what I mean by that in a second. So I'm closing all these up. All my edges are down, so I'm going back in over every section and smoothing that foil out. So it's gonna be smooth to the touch and look smooth as well. See how smooth that foil is? It almost looks one with the glass. So now that one's all set. So the reason I use the paintbrush for inward curves like that, this can happen. Do you see that split in the foil right there? This foil isn't stretchy. So just logically thinking about it, after you lay that foil down, going right in and pinching it, you're asking this foil to stretch to a wider space to accommodate that curve. Obviously it's gonna split. So instead of going right in and pinching that, I like to use my paintbrush and slowly push it open, and that seems to give the foil enough time to really open up and it doesn't split. It stretches it just to the amount you need. So same thing here, guys. Pulling out a little bit of that foil, get it going. I'm gonna start on my easy side, so since these are concave, I'm gonna start on my easier edges so I can just pinch those closed and get them out of the way. Placing it down right on the center and rocking my fingers over it so it's secure and pinching it closed. Right down the center, making those lines perfectly even. Pinch it closed. Now we're to our curved edge. Not gonna pinch it closed. I'm gonna go back in with my paintbrush, just slowly stretch that edge out to make sure that we don't split it. Now I'm back at the beginning. I'm just gonna overlap that final edge a little bit, rip it off. Now I'll go back in with my brush. So I'm slowly rocking back and forth to stretch that foil out so I know it's not gonna split. Even if it does split, it's an easy fix to just go right back in and patch it up. But it is harder to solder over if you have blunt edges of foil on top of one another, if that makes sense. Now going in, smoothing these edges out. Now that all my edges are down, gonna make sure all edges are smooth and burnished. Okay, so as an example, because this edge was split, if I wanted to patch that, all you do is cut your foil directly down the center so you've got two tiny little strips. take one of these strips in your tweezers. I got a little piece left on here. So I'm gonna use that up. Grab that little tiny piece. So it's just maybe 1/8 of an inch wide. And I'm just gonna go right in and catch that split. So I'm just laying that foil right over that foil edge, that split down the middle. So now that split is perfectly covered. I'm gonna go over it, burnish it, make sure it's nice and smooth, and it's perfectly patched and you can move on. Because again, if you leave that area open, once you hit that with solder, the solder will not stick to the glass. The solder will only stick to your copper foil. So if you have splits everywhere along your copper foil, it's gonna look like crap. So if you're not confident or not advanced enough in your copper foil and you've got splits everywhere, it's gonna show. So just take the time to go back in and patch it up. It just makes it look so much more professional. So I think that's pretty much it. This is one of the easiest parts. I do wanna go over something like this here. So obviously I make a different kind of stained glass. I would call it very modern. And there's not cuts everywhere like there is along this piece, because the more cuts you have, the more edges of solder that you have. Like right here in this area, there's tons of cuts, tons of solder. The stronger that piece is going to be, if that makes sense. So right here versus right here, this contact point, or right here, there's only that tiny little edge of copper foil and solder that's gonna hold this piece together. So personally, what I like to do is go in and patch this area, if you will. So instead of leaving that super thin line of copper foil, I'm gonna go in and make this a little bit thicker. So when I do hit it with solder, it's gonna be nice and strong. So just like I already did here on the edge of this guy's head, I put a nice thick band of copper foil, so it will be a nice thick band of solder, really holding that piece together strong. So I'm gonna take that split piece that I've already cut, and I'm gonna make this edge connecting the moon a little thicker. So I know it's gonna be nice and strong and able to hold the weight of the piece itself. I'm just gonna peel off this pre-cut strip and simply make this edge thicker. Now it will change the look of the actual piece, of course, having a thick band of solder in the middle. But as I said in my cutting video, you could never cut such a deep curved moon like this anyway. So you've got to make a break in the moon somewhere. You might as well make it right where this head ends up landing. And I put it right on the same angle as the neck as well. So now, once this piece is together, you've got tons of thick solder space that's gonna hold this piece together nice and tight. I hope I'm making sense. If not, you can always ask questions down below. But now that I've got nice thick soldered edges, I'm confident that this piece is gonna be strong enough to hold the weight of itself. Down here, these are all unground pieces of glass, because sometimes it's easier to leave small pieces like this unground, so when they do fit back together, they fit together absolutely seamlessly. If I was to go in and grind these tiny little pieces away, they wouldn't fit together as perfectly as they do right now, if that makes sense. So little pieces like that I will leave to cut apart after I've ground everything already. So yeah, I think that's just about it. I just gotta finish wrapping these last few pieces, and then we can finish everything with solder and patina. Okay guys, that is it. We have fully ground and wrapped these two pieces. So the only thing left to do is solder them and patina. So I think I'm going to wrap this video up here, guys, and as always, I will have everything used in today's video linked down below, as well as my Instagram and my Etsy shop. If you like this kind of content, make sure you subscribe and give this video a thumbs up so I know what to show next. Stay tuned for my next video. I'll be taking you with me to the glass store for some glass shopping. If you have any questions, please feel free to comment down below. I'm always around to answer them, and if not, I will see you in my next video. Bye!